Welcome to GovCon Unscripted, where we dive into the unfiltered stories and strategies from all around the world of government contracting. Join host Chelsea Roberts as she explores how to navigate, thrive, and win in this complex but lucrative industry.
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to GovCon Unscripted. I'm your host, Chelsea Roberts, CEO of Collaborative Compositions. Today, I've got with us Jeff Shapiro, partner at CohnReznick. Jeff, who are you and what do you do?
Thanks for having me, Chelsea. This is fabulous. I love this series. I'm Jeff. I'm a partner at CohnReznick, specializing in government contracting. Amazing how Chelsea found me. I'm the rare public accounting partner who does both a bit of audit, mostly in the regulatory space, meaning DCAA style audits, as well as advising companies dealing with DCAA style issues.
And DCAA accounting is one of the, I don't want to say the banes of my existence, but probably the banes of some other people's existence out there in the GovCon world. And I think that's a topic that I don't think we've really ever touched on the show. I'd just love to jump right in and say, what are some of the biggest things that you're finding when you're doing some of these audits? And first of all, what does DCAA even stand for?
Sure. The Defense Contract Audit Agency, primary purview is the Department of Defense. They used to be about 5,000 employees, probably down to 4,000, the recent reorganizations and downsizing. But they capture the whole procurement cycle process in terms of supporting the warfighter, doing proposal audits, doing incurred cost audits, business system audits. They do a whole bunch of stuff. And it happens to be the same thing my not so 1,000 people group do here at CohnReznick. And dealing with DCAA type audits, it's the same type audits, like I said, we see the whole gamut from companies not monitoring their subcontractors, paying reasonable prices and be able to demonstrate it. So many companies just go out there and they just go by and be so mission focused. We love that. And we see that now with the acquisition strategy changing it at Department of Defense. We want to go commercial. We want to speed up and fill in that valley of debt. Same thing, even if you're on a cost-reimbursable type contract and you want to get to the specialists that do that thing that your company doesn't have the bandwidth to do it or doesn't have the specialty to do it, you still got to make sure you're paying a fair and reasonable price and go through a very intricate process and be able to demonstrate it. Like sometimes you'll have that great negotiation and it's like, great, good, sign here and go. But they don't write it down. And that's one of many. I can probably spend this whole hour, Chelsea, talking about all the various issues. So whether it's compensation, whether it's not knowing their indirect rates to the proper projects, you name it, DCA is going to find it. Folks, internal controls and systems, people doing the journal entries, the same people approving them. It's like all these risks. We hear all these problems related to fraud and waste and abuse. And it often fraud, another topic for another day, usually talks about intent. But the waste and abuse often just comes from companies, they're trying to get the job done, they're wanting to do the right thing. They're just not documenting, they don't have a firm, iterative process to make sure that they're spending the money properly. And so they just go down the road of let's just do whatever it takes so the customer's happy. So there's a give and take there. And that's a hard challenge for us auditors who come in generally don't know what the mission is about to the extent as you know, both the customer, the buying activity, and the actual company. But how could you accomplish this? And the people in the accountants are like, we just did what we were told. And so there's lots of different challenges there. But if you want to go into any specific details you pick, I could talk a little bit more.
Yeah, I have just one personal anecdote to share. I've worked with small businesses throughout my career, and I've also worked with those large businesses out there. And I found that the large companies can sometimes be, I don't want to say overzealous, but overzealous with some of their accounting processes. And an example of that is I once received from a prime I will not name, a priority mailed, hand delivered via UPS check for all of 3 cents. Yes, it was great. I was like, thank goodness I can pay for the gas to get to the bank and I can pay the bank tellers' salaries and all of the fees that it's going to take just to deposit this. Like that 3 cents really, that made my day for that company. And it changed the way that I was looking at this. I'm like, really? You spent all of the time and money and who knows how many people's time and money went into writing a check for 3 cents. And the response is, we did it for contract closeout. we had to be on the penny for contract closeout. So I want to just get a feel for what that looks like from your perspective.
Sure.
Are you going down to the cent and the penny level there with your audits? Is DCAA
Oh
doing
my
that?
gosh.
I mean,
I
who do I
hope not.
blame for this whole situation happening?
No, Chelsea, I love that story. I'm surprised you don't have that check framed right behind you yet. But anyways, so the answer is for everyone's sake listening to this, I hope that will never, ever happen to you. Anytime I see in any of my audit reports, anything showing sense, I'm like, get rid of that. No one cares. Heck, we no longer produce the penny.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, what you're getting at is a concept called materiality. And auditors, they have to make a cutting off point to say, listen, this is the amount of dollars given what we're looking at that it's just not worth chasing after. Even if whether you hire the independent public accounting firm or you even hire DCA, what is worth their while to keep chasing down? Like you can easily find people who have 25 cent to $2 differences and going over per diem here to eternity, whether you're a government employee, a contractor. And at the end of the day, will you find hundreds and hundreds of dollars? Probably. But why did you just spend all that time finding those hundreds and $100? Instead, you need to concentrate what's on the millions and millions of dollars. And going through that evaluation, understand where's the risk, what controls are in place to help prevent the risks. And you go down through that very back and forth process, understanding where could things go wrong, where are they more likely to go wrong. Based on our experience, what have we seen in the past? That being said, I certainly have customers who have come to me, Teresa, you can laugh. Yeah, if you find someone buying a Coke on the job, you better tell me, and I want to have them credit the contract. And I say, you got it. So, Chelsea, am I here to tell you, have I had audit findings for a couple of bucks? I have. And those are particular customers. And we've lost that argument long ago, whether or not it's worth doing that. Even for that kind of a customer, I still have a level of materiality. So if we happen to find it, like, all right, guys, just throw it in there. That'll just make them happy. The bottom line, yes, we should be focusing on the bigger dollars, impactful stuff. And sometimes there's the occasional occurrence where you find a smaller dollar stuff, but it's symptomatic of if they continue to do this, they're going to start doing the bigger things and see how far they get away with it. That's when I do start reporting that kind of stuff. But hey, listen, the dollar value may not be significant, but you need to know they started putting a holiday party on contract. They only did a karaoke thing at someone's house and they bought a couple of cases of beer. So they charged $500 to the contract, or they put it in their G&A. So for the $10 million I'm auditing, what's the big deal in $500? Any contracting officer's not even going to try assessing a penalty because FAR says, listen, anything under $5,000, you don't even have to charge the penalty. But I'm still going to tell you about it so they don't decide to keep doing this and be like, oh, see, the auditors didn't say anything. We can keep doing it. I know it's a small thing and it'll annoy me. And any taxpayer, if you heard that anything like that is ever paid for, that kind of stuff always makes a Washington Post. But nonetheless, yeah. I know DCA will say it too. It's all about materiality and finding what really matters, what's worth spending time negotiating and figuring out.
And if it's not on the small dollar value side, if we're talking like I'm working for a large program with the air systems group of a specific agency. There's a very large prime that's responsible for that. And I think that they bring up the need to be the ticks and ties on all of their accounting lines and be sure that they're just really considerate of what may or may not come up in a DCAA audit for them on their perspective. But yet at the same time, I see some things come through from what they're billing to the government that I'm like, does this make the most sense if they're constantly charging proposal costs, for instance, to a program or to a contract that they've already been funded on and the government's not getting proposals with any regularity? Does that cause any sort of concern for you? Does that bring up any sort of ask of why?
Yeah, you sure heard this many times from various consultants, but it really does depend. So if you're on a large program, look, so my largest contract was Department of Energy, and we audited a bunch of cleanup sites. And as you may imagine, when all these huge cleanup sites all around the country, you start digging into the ground, you're going to find stuff that you didn't realize was in there. And so the contract said you're going to clean it up for uranium, this and this, that. And then all of a sudden you find this new thing on site. You're like, uh-oh, was this actually part of the contract to clean up this new kind of waste? You got to go back to contracting. Hey, we found this. What do we do now? And so the contracting officer will take this back. Oh, yeah, we need to make a change to the contract. And so give me a proposal to change it. Yes. So that's an easy example that says, look, if not for what the government is going to direct you to do, you wouldn't have to charge it. You wouldn't incur any of these kinds of proposal costs to figure out how much it costs to, all right, I now need to get a different specialist to deal with this thing and I know teach me how to handle it, yada yada. So same thing with your air program. So if it's part of that program as an enhancement that the government wants and it's an extension, yeah, that kind of business, that kind of B&D cost, like B&P costs, I don't believe I just said it, because I was thinking B&D. B&P costs, yeah, likely needs to be charged to the contract because the government's telling you, hey, I need this change. The scope is going to change. So in that case, that could be an allowable B&P contract that gets B&P cost that gets allowed directly applicable to the contract. So yes, that happens. I'm okay with that. That doesn't bother me.
Okay. What does bother you? What are some of the big things in big programs where you're like, kind of want to know more, or tell me why, or what's behind that charge?
Yeah, I'm not going to say it bothers me, but how it gets to what we like to call the final cost objective, which is a fancy way of saying contract or task order or CLIN. You got things like project management offices. You've got other cost estimating relationships. So a lot of contractors like to play games so that they can allocate costs to where the money is. That's where I'm trying to get to. So I was giving them ideas. Follow the funding. That's a traditional term we hear in our industries, especially on cost reimbursable contracts, Chelsea. As you very well know, the incentive for government agencies to spend their money mostly have 1 year appropriations, although latest reforms have been changing that to multi-year and maybe some 0 year. But there's every incentive for every agency to spend everything they got no matter what. And so what does that mean? Hey, contractor, make sure you spend all that obligation so I don't have to go back to Congress and have to tell them, oh, whoops, I didn't spend that much. Can you find somewhere else? There's just no incentive to do it. Obviously, it does happen. Reprogramming happens. By the way, for background, I did spend 8.5 years in the Intel community, so I understand the government side. So I understand those challenges. And I've spent a year doing budgeting. Not my most favorite year, but at least I have the experience. Anyways, so back to my point about finding ways to allocate money to projects that maybe shouldn't have been there. Maybe the stuff that really bothers me, and it happens all the time. Don't try to convince me otherwise, but the whole project manager is going, hey, I know you're working on this, but can you charge this other code instead?
Yeah.
Happens all the flipping time. I'm working on this fixed price contract. I got a lot of room on this cost reimbursable CLIN or contract. Yeah, can you put it over there and make sure you write this? Happens all the time. And that's soft fraud, right? No one would ever call it that. Most people at those junior levels wouldn't even think twice to be like, how dare you do that? No, they're going to be like, of course, whatever you say. So trying to figure that out. I know the people that talk about where's the fraud, that one, I can almost guarantee you is a multi-million, if not a lot more thing that goes on. There's people that are on standby that are told, hey, why don't you just charge the contract? I need a way to figure out how to pay you. There's all these weird things that'll go on. Maybe it's part of the policy and sure it's following procedures, but does that mean it really is allowed to be done on your contract? I don't know. Yeah, so playing around with allocations, playing around how people charge their time, that's a huge bugaboo and really difficult for us auditors to easily detect. And so as we get better and better with analytics and looking at trends of how people charge time, we can ask those questions. But the problem is, if I'm looking at that cost from 2023 now in 2026, really I'm going to go call John Smith employee like, hey, remember the time back here? Why did your charging practices start swinging wildly? They're not going to know.
Yeah. Who's going to remember that?
No.
Does that happen a lot with LPTA contracts? I know this is like my least favorite topic.
Yeah.
No one should love it, but lowest price, technically acceptable contracts. I thought we were in like the past. That was in the past, and we moved well beyond that. The government might understand you get what you pay for. In reality, I've seen a couple of things come out recently for IT services that are like LPTA type contracts. And it's stereotypical with companies that kind of come into those battles and they say, we'll bid it really low just to win the contract. And then we'll either make it up on modifications or we'll eat the cost so we can get the customer. And the reality of it is like a lot of those companies are still growing and booming. And you're like, are you really making a bunch of money on lowest price contracts? Or are you maybe charging that work elsewhere so that you can stay under that price? Is that a thing that happens?
Correct. I can't specifically call out an example, but yes, your fears are very equivalent to how I feel about LPTA. There's a time and a place, very specific scope, very specific timeline. Like LPTA and the requirements are not very simplistic. Like it's easy to define. Put it in that box. Show me what you got. As long as I can convince you can do it, you're going to get the job. When you start doing some R&D like stuff, or there's going to be lots of high expectation of unexpected stuff happening, like why would you ever do that LPTA? And I agree, that's the scariest thing. So yes, so companies that are under LPTA bid contracts, obviously once it's executed, it's get the job done. This is the price. And I can only imagine within those companies, how do you manage and mitigate that risk? Are you looking to buy in and you want to get that CPARs? And so that when the Oasis Plus comes out, when the MAPS comes out, you can say, yep, I did it. See?
Yep.
And so for you to take that hit to only make 1% margin or a negative 5% margin, is that the right kind of investment so you can get to that next level kind of contract and be okay with it? And I'm going to say, yeah, I'm sure there's lots of those kinds of strategies going on. But you and I probably both know several contractors that they just love LPTAs. They somehow have learned all the tricks of the trade. I'm not going to name names, but I'm sure you've seen this kind of trick. So they do these kinds of LPTA where they will bid. It's the bait and switch. They'll say they got all these people. They'll put in these people maybe the first month or two, and all of a sudden, you know what? We can replace it with these people. And those people are a level down. I'm sure you've heard this, the greening strategies.
Mm-hmm.
So you take the same person working the same level. No, I think it's time for you to rotate to somewhere else. We're going to put someone else in there. So someone who's now at a lower level. And again, what was bid as senior system engineer is now being done by a junior systems engineer. And as long as the project somehow gets to where it needs to be, the client's not going to complain. And that's the big challenge for the cores out there is, am I doing okay and holding feet to the fire on requirements and all that kind of stuff? And that's challenging, given that kind of constructive feedback. How often have you seen negative CPARs, Chelsea? It doesn't happen often. No one wants to call people out. It'll happen. I'm sure you've seen your share of cure notices. But at the end of the day, as long as the program's moving, it's a little bit slow. Usually as a core, you'll make the excuse for them. Oh, yeah, unfortunately, they had a blip in hiring. Oh, they had a hard time backfilling this requirement. So they start making the excuses on behalf of the contractors. And then at the end of 5 years are over, and all of a sudden, company did just fine. CPARs will go in as a satisfactory, and they made their money, and they're going to move on to the next opportunity. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Yes. Yeah. So you're right. Your sense, I think, is right on LPTA and how those are treated. The good news is they're meeting the policymakers throughout agencies, OFPP, and elsewhere. Yeah, best value is the way to go.
So best value is obviously the way to go, but I've actually seen some debate across LinkedIn, which I'm always just amazed to see. Some people are like, doesn't value translate to dollars? So isn't the best price what we're going to go with? And isn't that effectively an LPT? I'm like, yeah, okay. Open to interpretation. Take it how you want it, put it however you want it. But at the end of the day, we're looking at how much actual tangible value you're getting, not just cost savings, because at the end of the day, the more money that you can allocate and obligate, more you're going to get next time, right? Yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah.
So this way I do have stories, Chelsea. So when I was in the government, I led a number of cost evaluation teams for competitive procurements. And so I've been in that room with the source selection authority, source selection evaluation boards. And my agency, just like most other agencies, wrote a section and that said, yep, we're going to consider technical, past performance, security. All those factors are wildly more important than price.
Right.
And what always seems to happen, maybe not in the first round, but if there's a BAFO situation where there's a round discussion, they come in, Look at that. Everyone has pretty much the identical proposal. So, to your point, who are they going to choose, Chelsea?
Yep.
They're going to almost definitely choose the lowest bidder. It's amazing how that happens. Was that the intention from the start? Maybe. I'm not going to accuse anything, but that's the reality, especially when you have that round of discussion. Without it, it would be great if contracting officers just say, you know what, we feel confident enough. Let's stop wasting time. You want to get this done on contract? One round and done. Don't guarantee the discussions. Or now with the new rules in 15, you technically can take one offer aside and be like, do you think you can fix this thing up? Can you clarify that this meant this? And then you're done. And then so that's how you get it done. And you want to close those gaps. You got to be not afraid to make decisions. I know everyone's afraid of that P word. And we had plenty of lawyers train us on that. But do it fairly, do it right. And you say guaranteed discussions are not guaranteed. We may not ask for a BAFO. You should be covered.
So you mentioned commercial there just a minute ago, and I want to touch on that. So over the last year, 2025 was a year of just upheaval, tension, change, a lot of discourse, a lot of differences that I never necessarily thought that I would see come to fruition on paper, at least. We'll see if they actually come to fruition in practice. But there's a lot of dialogue around bringing commercial companies into the fold, going commercial first, trying to find the best commercial solution before you go out of your way to try to find other custom or exquisite solutions that are specifically made for the government purpose. And it seems to me that's somewhat contradictory with things like DCAA accounting, because the reality is that I don't think I actually know of a commercial firm that has the accounting practices that are aligned with DCAA. So to try to make that transition, are they just expected to eat the cost, or are they excluded from that requirement? What have you seen on that front as we've started to take this look?
Love this. All right. So this might take a while, but let me go through this. Chelsea,
Perfect.
like I told you up front, I make a living due to DCAA accounting and audit.
Sure.
Okay. And I'm going to be the first to tell you the move to commercial should mean the less need for DCAA style accounting.
Okay.
You want to buy commercial? Buy a commercial. When Walmart goes out to its suppliers to buy new Barbie dolls to stock on their shelves, they are not going to go ask Mattel, I assume that's who still makes Barbies, hey, how much did it cost to put that together? Okay, great. Now, so can you take that and put only 5 to 7% on as a profit, and that's how much I'll pay you in price? No. It's a pure supply demand based on forecast. How much can I sell this for? Yes, I will buy it for that much. And you just go and do it. And so if the government wants to purely buy commercial, as FAR Part 12 has been there since, I believe, 1994, do it. There's no requirement within FAR Part 12 other than making sure you pay a fair and reasonable price. I'm all for that. You want to ask the company for, hey, can you show me an invoice for where you sell this product similarly to a commercial company? I'd be okay with that. I don't love it, but I'd be okay with that. But asking for costs and being like, hey, how did you allocate your overhead so that you could come up in prices? They're going to be like, I don't want to make any hand gestures. So yeah, so that's the whole point. Whether it's FAR Part 12, whether it's OTA, whether it's various types of CIBR, CSOs, like stop it. Stop thinking that you're going to get cost to understand whether or not you're paying a fair and reasonable price. And I know that is an absolute paradigm shift. Whatever we've been doing, I've been in the industry, I hate to tell you how long, over 20 years now. And like, yeah, I've seen the evolution, but we can't keep doing the same things over and over again. The definition of insanity, right? We have to evolve. We have to change. I know it's really comfortable to come back to cost. We know it's really comfortable to, no, I'd rather do this as a 15 cost plus because I really don't want to pay more than what we need to. You know what? Pay more than you need to, because sometimes that's going to be a lot. The time is money, right? Like you could do it faster and pay 10, 20% more than waiting 10 months because you did a cost reimbursable and now you got to wait for the audit. Oh, then you got to wait for the closeouts. There's a value to that. And that's just not old thinking. So now I'll take it otherwise. Yes, there are many instances where the non-traditional commercial companies, they need to do some kind of R&D. They want to do something unusual. They want the SpaceXs of the world, the various AI companies that are out there. There's certain things you can do commercially and you can deliver and show it. But there's going to be a point where they may have to make that crossover and be like, all right, yeah, I'll be willing to do this. And there's no other way to do it than charge you some kind of cost-based method. And so I've worked with a number of companies who we call them traditionally commercial type companies who have said, I now need to figure out how to set up a government division. I now need to figure out government accounting. And there is a way to do that where you segregate that business to do its own accounting structure. Maybe it has its own ERP that is totally different from what you do when you report publicly or whatever it may be. And you can consolidate it. It's all possible. But again, I am the first to tell those companies, don't do it unless you have to. And when the government says, I need you to do this, you need to question it and push back. And don't think the first time they say it, it means it's the right way. And I mean that with all respect. They should be encouraged to find a way to do this so you don't have all this. It's these OTAs that have these cost reimbursable parts. It's like, why? Why are you doing that? Stop it. So it's the same thing. Like any other RFI, RFP that hits the streets before award, you got to give that feedback. Why are you even doing this as a Part 15? My business can do this commercially. You need to be able to stand up for yourself. And that's where the knowledge of how the government works comes in handy. When a company who's been growing up in Silicon Valley selling purely commercial, they have no clue about how the government works. They just understand, oh yeah, I'm sure the Social Security Administration would love some high-level encryption to make sure that when its checks go out, they're not fraudulently cashed or whatever it may be, or logging in. That's definitely a commercial service. But how do you tell Social Security Administration that this is how we're going to deliver it, and here are the terms, and this is how I can retain the IP, all that kind of good stuff. And like I said, I had a long answer for that, and I appreciate you asking for it. So there's many different ways. So commercial companies who are listening to this, trust me, the government needs you, and the government wants your product. Hopefully they don't make you do something more than necessary. And you're very much in your right to say, do you really have to do it the way you're telling me? Because right now the options are out there. All the policymakers, especially in this administration, are firmly supporting, let's do anything but cost-based contracting.
And I love that you brought up the idea of segregating and spinning out, cutting out the government portion when it needs to be to get into that. At the end of the day, making sure that's a separate entity and that's a separate sort of organization. Because I have worked with, I can't tell you how many commercial companies that come into it and they're like, oh, we'll just use our commercial pricing and we'll just do it the same way. And then they realize very quickly, oh, wait, we don't have any sort of real understanding of how to segregate costs into cost pools and how to put things into a cost spreadsheet that the government might ask for and how to break down all of these different sort of cost line items that we might have to demonstrate to the government that we have. And it comes to a point where oftentimes they're like, should we just do this across the organization? And I'm like, no, you will kill your commercial business by trying to go that route.
They will hate you.
Yeah, exactly. You will be very quickly disliked and probably not invited to the holiday party, which you are not billing to a contractor.
Yeah, so I had a client who told me, Jeff, we're going to do this, but if you tell me my whole company has to do a timesheet, I am going to fire you.
Yeah, hey, it's fair. And making sure that the stuff that is inherently governmental functioning for your company stays in that inherently governmental basket rather than, and I hate to say it, polluting the rest of the commercial business that you've established. That's just a key to being able to maintain some likability throughout your organization and to maintain your commercial business kind of as a whole, because it's not cheap to go about setting up all those new systems and processes and getting everybody to abide, especially if they've been doing it this other way for so long. It's pretty rigorous. It takes some time and energy.
Yeah. I'm a huge proponent of culture, right?
Yeah.
And so those companies who have made those widgets, made those software packages, those whatever services they deliver, they've done it under a certain culture. And then when you start involving the federal government, it's just a different beast. And
yeah,
for better or worse, it has impact on culture.
right.
And so because we now do business with the government, we now need to do ABC. And sometimes that's truly like how you represent yourself in public, where you're showing up to. Oh, you're now a government contractor. To the legal side, I'm not a lawyer by any means, but when you start commingling the business, government, and commercial, there's a lot of risk there. False claims and misallocation of costs. Do you really want the auditors getting up in your business about what you do on a cost basis in your commercial side? You have to make that decision. And even though there might be costs in your C-suite that in theory benefit that government business, do you really want them to go digging deep into that CEO's amazing golden parachute package and asking questions? It's just reality. And sometimes you just got to eat that cost. And that's my whole argument in the first place is avoid the Part 15 world.
Yeah.
Stay 12, stay all these other options so you don't have to deal with this nonsense. Like I said, I told you where I make my living, but if you want to do it, there's never been a better opportunity to sell commercially to the government than right now, than I've ever seen personally.
I love that. And I'm assuming that you in your role advise some of those commercial companies that are coming in and starting to dabble in that sort of cost reimbursement realm and seeing some of those things that they may have shooting up as like red flags. Okay, we might need to bring somebody in to help us with this sort of whole accounting organism that they've established.
Yeah. I tell them, all right, if you must go this way, find a way for your commercial business to sell that as a package to you, and that's it. And you can demonstrate that we sell that commercially to that, so why can't you sell to that? Oh, okay. Just simplify it. For Occam's razor, right? Often the most complex problems are solved by the simplest solutions. And that's what I try to do. A lot of practical solutions out there. There's a lot of gray out there that can be taken advantage of. But I'm here also to say that not every DCAA auditor or DCMA contracting officer or any other contract officer may agree with you. So I will have to put that caveat out there. That's for better or worse. And that's a fun part of my day when those happen.
If folks are interested in either learning more about how they can establish some DCAA compliant accounting, or if they're looking to have a pre-audit done, how can they get a hold of you? Are those things that you do? Are you willing to talk to them?
Of course. Look, I talk to anyone. I don't charge anyone for an hour. Just be like, look, I just need to brain dump what's going on with my company. What do you think? This government contracting stuff is hard. That's why there's a community, Chelsea. That's how we came together, I assume. We can't do this alone, especially those who out there listening to this who are just starting out. There's so much out there you can get for nothing. And so, yeah, CohnReznick, we have a huge free resource site for government contractors. You can go to CohnReznick.com/GovCon. You'll find a whole bunch of great stuff that just will educate you, and you can take some time learning, but you'll find my contact information there. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to have a conversation. I love connecting people. I may not be the right person you need help with the GovCon stuff. I will find you the right person who is.
I love that. And folks, we'll put all that information in the show notes so you can get quick access to Jeff and to CohnReznick and all of their resources. This has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time on the show. Yeah, and I hope you have a warm weekend because we are definitely still cold here in Western Tennessee. But yeah, I appreciate your time today, Jeff. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Chelsea.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening to this week's episode of GovCon Unscripted. Don't forget to share, subscribe with your friends, and do your part, leave a heart, and make sure that you've got the show out there for everyone else to hear. We'll see you next time, and we'll have you on the show later this year to talk about all the changes that have happened, especially within the regulatory realm.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of GovCon Unscripted with your host, Chelsea Roberts. Do you have a GovCon story or need guidance in government contracting? Connect with Chelsea on LinkedIn to be a guest on the show or to enhance your business strategy. Don't forget, your network is your net worth. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your growing GovCon community.